Paradigm Shifts, a kaiju flash fiction. I watched the open ocean churn and crash from my kayak. Foam coated the surface of the deep as the amber waves turned into a Stygian void while the sun dipped below the horizon. Small waves rocked my vessel, but I paddled on towards the lighthouse. The old thing had stood longer than I had been alive, and then some. A trail of crimson lights floated on the water leading towards the beach. They served as the indicator of a jetty resting below the waves, connecting the lighthouse to the mainland at low tide. But at high tide, the lighthouse was an island of solace from the troubles of the world it was separated from. For a time. Getting closer, I noticed a massive boat emerging from the open waters. As it drew in, I could hear the sounds of conversations overlapping into a deluge of white noise. The pandemic was officially over, and now every soul on Earth deemed it necessary to flock to one another. A desire to make up for lost time, maybe a manner of defiance now that social capital wasn't hinged on restrictions or feigned obedience to them. I got a better look at the boat as it crept up on my starboard. At over 170 feet, the expanded terraces and pool told me that it was a SteelSeries San Lorenzo craft. Massive lights shined down on me like an alien saucer about to beam up its latest test subject. Waving my arms in yellow paddle, I hoped my bright clothes and kayak was noticed. As uncomfortable as getting capsized by a stray wave could be, I would have braved the freezing waters rather than a collision. Thankfully, the super yacht had seen me and gave me a wide berth. The waves that followed the vessel's turn were only minor bumps, fun to ride and setting me a bit off course, but I was in no rush to my destination. Now floating at the yacht's stern, I heard someone call to me from the lower deck. I turned, noticing several people waving for me to come closer. More than once I'd obliged, only for it to be a prank to spray me with water from the motor. I'd come to the island at night in the past often, so the keeper would probably let me inside to dry off if this was a prank. The boat had stopped, and when I came aboard, I was greeted by people of similar ages to myself, more than likely from the other colleges in the area. My kayak was hitched to one of the terraces while a beer was thrust into my gaping hand. Parties weren't alien to me, but those with gossip, heavy drinking, and a night of illicit possibilities were never my forte. Sitting down, I was surrounded by seemingly everyone, clamoring to listen to why I was out here. As the mundanity of it set in, many went back to their more stimulating interactions. The one who had flagged me down happened to be the daughter of the person who owned the yacht, Cynthia. Enthusiastically, she explained the ins and outs of her STEM degree and the numerous interviews and internships she had lined up. As we conversed, I took in the rigidity of her beliefs. Throughout our verbal sparring, she was convinced that science as a system couldn't be twisted and abused for gain. It's not the science that's wrong, I recall her saying, citing much of the pandemic discourse while the others on board concurred with. I argued that if there was no force to challenge a theory or uninvested individuals to reconsider articles and papers, then like anything influenced by man, it's subject to corruption and bias. I kept my examples non-specific, but the subject had seemingly struck a nerve amongst them, so I politely took my leave. Being passionate is respectable, but a healthy skepticism of anti-cathedral ideas is important. As I resumed paddling, I recalled back before the pandemic, which seemed like lifetimes ago, first venturing to the lighthouse and hearing the drone of the foghorn. Almost as if I willed it to be, I heard its deep bellow, a low thrum which was matched by something else. A rumble that sounded like a massive string plucked across the water. The second sound shook my kayak and crawled up my spine. The water around me had turned turbulent, and I raised my paddle so as not to capsize. I turned to the yacht, glimpsing something breach the surface and cause the 100-footer's port side to lurch out of the water. I could faintly hear the sounds of people flung overboard and general panic of those still aboard. The port, even in sight, was several miles out and probably hadn't noticed the commotion. My hope was someone had radioed an SOS, but my optimism was dashed and fear gripped my bones as I watched something punch through the ship with the sounds of bent metal and splintered wood echoing in the night. As it wriggled in the moonlight, I could make out the creature's purple hue and serpentine-like shape, but as quickly as it appeared, it shot back down, the sound of the crumbling vessel only overtaken by the thundering crash of the ocean as it swallowed the yacht, pulling down anything close by into the deep. The wave finally came for me and I was capsized. As I tumbled in the lightless water, survival was my only thought. When my head was back above the surface, I saw that the lighthouse still wasn't far off. Ditching the upturned kayak, I swam towards the land, raggedly dragging myself onto the shore. I lay panting beneath the towering form of the lighthouse. While sprawled on my back, I could see the keeper come out of the gallery through my blurry and disoriented vision. Old Man Marsh was saying something to me, but I was too exhausted to understand it. The light was focused on where the ship had been and where now only debris remained. Like a lightning strike, the thing shot out from the deep again, spearing cleanly through the mid-tower, causing the top half of the lighthouse to collapse onto the keeper's quarters. The impact showered me in rubble, and I curled up to avoid serious injury. Peeking my head out, I watched the thing, which resembled a giant worm, recoil towards the waves. As it slunk back into the waters, the oceans rose. From the depths of the sea strode a thing of maddening improbability. A long, rugose head tipped with two curved horns at the base of its snout. The purple thing I had assumed was a creature all its own receded back into its saurian-like snout behind a row of curved fangs. What I witnessed was only its tongue, which terrified me even more. To think of what prey or eldritch predator such a monster faced, to force evolution to endow it with such an adaptation, a chameleon's tongue 1,000-fold. Past its neck was a muscular chest and grasping forelimbs. The hands and back of its forearms were webbed and tipped with claws. Those fins on its arms and those running down its back reminded me of a sailfish, gnarly spines between thin membranes. As it drew closer, I saw its powerfully built legs boasting all the anatomy and musculature of a prehistoric horror. This thing, an antediluvian caricature of fish and reptiles, stood over 100 feet in height. Even as the cloudless night allowed the moon to illuminate its features, I was at a loss to comprehend all I was seeing. Its skin was small and pebbly, and being deep navy in color made it almost invisible. Even right in front of me, it blended with the night sky and dark waters like a colossal living shadow. Only its eyes, which glowed a green pallor, were clearly visible, and in them I could not make out any deep thought or ancient wisdom, only honed instincts, something so large that it remained unseen for millennia could possess. When it opened its maw, the dreadful groan, through pure sonic force alone, held me down. Covering my eyes and ears, I knew only that it was gone when the vibrations of its steps ceased, and an eerie quiet now lay over the bay. Now alone in the ruins of a dead monument, I let out a maddened laugh. At the impossibility of what had happened, at the mathematical probability that I would be the one to have seen it, at the reality that I had nothing to prove any part of my tale. But my raving cackles echoed on as I considered the sciences. Methods and theories wouldn't need to consider this new node, and the ugly paradigm shifts that come with new knowledge. No credible witnesses or ways for a repeat experiment, because the science knew that sea monsters were not real. Well, looks like you made it to the end. If you're listening to this, which in that case, I thank you all for listening. I really much enjoyed doing this, especially keeping to a flash fiction format in the sense that I could only use 1,500 words to do the story, and thought that I could find some way to do at least an interesting kaiju story and get it within that little time limit or word count, I guess. And this was originally planned to be part of a anthology for a company, I guess, but it ended up not getting accepted, so I did some more edits to it, and now it's here on YouTube. And I think definitely expect to see more of these. They won't probably all be connected, but I do want to at least find an outlet to express my writing skills in a way that's a little bit less long format like Odo Island, but still kind of showing off my artwork as well as those of my monsters. So that's all, guys. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't. And I'm Zimzilla, and I'll see you guys next time.